Maya Patel wiped down the same table for the third time that evening, her tired eyes watching the rain streak down the windows of Tony's diner. The neon sign outside flickered between open and ope, casting a pink glow across the wet pavement. It was one of those nights when time seemed to crawl, and every minute felt like an hour. She glanced at the clock above the coffee machine. 9:30, only 2.5 hours left until closing time. Her feet ached in her worn sneakers and her back protested from carrying heavy trays all day. This was her second shift today. She'd started at 6 in the morning, worked until 2, then came back at 4 for the dinner rush. Double shifts had become her normal routine for the past 3 months. The reason was simple but heartbreaking. Her mom needed expensive treatments that their insurance wouldn't cover. Every extra dollar Maya earned went straight to the medical bills that kept piling up on their kitchen table. Some nights, she counted the tips in her apron pocket and calculated how many more shifts she'd need to work. It never seemed like enough. Tony's diner wasn't the fanciest place in town, but it had character. The red vinyl booths were cracked in places, held together with duct tape. The jukebox in the corner hadn't worked properly in years, occasionally playing random songs when someone walked by. The smell of coffee and fried food hung in the air, mixed with the faint scent of cleaning supplies. Maya knew every regular customer by heart. There was old Pete, who came in every Tuesday for meatloaf and mashed potatoes. Mrs. Chen always ordered green tea and a slice of lemon pie while working on crossword puzzles. The teenage couple in booth 3 shared a milkshake every Friday night, thinking they were being romantic. These familiar faces made the long hours bearable. Tonight was different, though. The usual crowd had thinned out because of the weather. Only a few customers scattered around the diner, mostly truck drivers waiting for the rain to ease up. Maya was refilling salt shakers when the bell above the door chimed. She looked up to see a man she'd never seen before. He stood in the doorway for a moment, shaking raindrops from his dark coat. Everything about him seemed out of place in Tony's diner. His suit looked expensive, the kind Maya had only seen in magazines. His shoes were polished leather, not the work boots or sneakers most customers wore. Even his hair was perfectly styled despite the rain. The man glanced around the diner, taking in the mismatched chairs and faded photographs on the walls. For a second, Maya wondered if he'd turn around and leave. Rich people usually drove past places like Tony's without a second glance. But instead, he walked toward the corner booth, the one by the window that overlooked the parking lot. Maya grabbed a menu and walked over to him. "Good evening," she said with her practiced customer service smile. "Pretty wet out there tonight." The man looked up at her and she noticed his eyes seemed tired, almost sad. "Yes, it is," he replied quietly. His voice was deep and smooth, the kind that suggested he was used to giving orders and being listened to. "Can I start you off with something to drink?" Maya asked, setting the menu down in front of him. "Coffee, please, black." He barely glanced at the menu. "And do you have apple pie?" "Fresh made this morning," Maya said. "Would you like it heated up?" "That would be nice, thank you." As Maya walked back to get his order, she couldn't help but wonder what brought someone like him to their little diner. Business travelers usually stopped at the chain restaurants near the highway. This man seemed different, though. There was something in his expression that reminded her of her own exhaustion, the weight of carrying heavy thoughts. She returned with his coffee and pie, setting them down carefully. "Here you go. Let me know if you need anything else." The man nodded his thanks but didn't say much. Maya went back to her closing duties, occasionally glancing over at him. He sat perfectly still, staring out the rain-streaked window. His coffee grew cold as he seemed lost in thought. The pie sat untouched on his plate. Maya had seen all kinds of customers over the years. Happy families celebrating birthdays, tired workers grabbing quick dinners, lonely people seeking the comfort of warm food and friendly conversation. But this man was different. He carried himself with confidence, yet there was something vulnerable about the way he sat alone in that booth. The rain continued to pound against the windows, creating a rhythmic sound that filled the quiet diner. Most of the other customers had left, leaving just the man in the corner booth and an elderly trucker finishing his coffee at the counter. Maya was wiping down the counter when she heard the man call her over. "Excuse me, miss." She walked back to his table. "Yes, sir." "I'll take the check, please." "Of course." Maya pulled out her order pad and calculated the total. "That'll be $8.50. The man reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a leather wallet. Maya noticed how expensive it looked, made of soft brown leather with gold corners. As he opened it to get his money, something small and white fluttered out, landing face up on the table. Maya's breath caught in her throat. Staring back at her from the small photograph was a face she knew better than her own. But it wasn't the face she was used to seeing. This woman was young, maybe 20 years old, with bright eyes and a huge smile. Her dark hair was long and wavy, styled in a way that looked like it was from decades ago, but Maya would recognize those eyes anywhere. Those were her mother's eyes. The photograph showed her mother as a young woman, radiating joy and happiness in a way Maya had never seen in person. Her mother these days was tired and sick, worn down by years of hard work and now fighting a battle against cancer. But in this picture she looked carefree and beautiful. Maya's hands started to shake as she stared at the photograph. Her heart pounded so hard she was sure the man could hear it. Questions raced through her mind. How did this stranger have a picture of her mother? Why was he carrying it in his wallet? Who was he? The man followed her gaze to the photograph and Maya watched his face change. His eyes widened and all the color drained from his cheeks. He looked from the picture to Maya's face, then back to the picture again. The diner suddenly felt completely silent except for the rain outside and the hum of the coffee machine. Maya couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even breathe properly. She just stood there, staring at the impossible photograph that had somehow fallen from a stranger's wallet. Time seemed to stop as both of them realized that this wasn't just a random encounter. This moment was about to change everything. Maya's hands trembled as she reached for the photograph. Her fingers barely touched the edges as she picked it up, afraid it might disappear if she moved too quickly. The picture felt real enough, but nothing about this moment made sense. "Excuse me," she whispered, her voice so quiet she wasn't sure he could hear her over the rain. She cleared her throat and tried again, louder this time. "Excuse me, sir." The man looked up at her, his face still pale from shock. She noticed his hands were shaking slightly as he set down his coffee cup. The expensive suit and confident appearance from earlier seemed to melt away, leaving someone who looked just as confused and frightened as she felt. "This photograph," Maya said, holding it up between them. "Why do you have this?" The man stared at her face, then at the picture, then back at her face again. His mouth opened and closed like he was trying to speak but couldn't find the words. Maya could see his mind racing, trying to process something that seemed impossible. He started, then stopped. He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up for the first time that evening. "I'm sorry, but you look exactly like... How did you get that picture?" "I didn't get it," Maya said, her voice getting stronger as confusion turned to determination. "It fell out of your wallet. This is my mother." "Why do you have a picture of my mother?" The words hung in the air between them. Maya watched as understanding slowly dawned in the man's eyes. He leaned back in the booth like someone had pushed him, his face going from pale to completely white. "Your mother," he repeated slowly. "What's your mother's name?" Maya hesitated. Every instinct told her not to give personal information to strangers, especially ones who mysteriously carried old photographs of her family. But something in his expression made her answer. "Elena," she said quietly. "Elena Martinez." The man's reaction was immediate and dramatic. He sucked in a sharp breath and gripped the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned white. For a moment, Maya thought he might faint right there in the booth. "Elena," he whispered, like he was testing how the name sounded. "Elena Martinez." "Yes," Maya said, starting to feel scared. "How do you know my mother? Who are you?" The man looked around the empty diner, suddenly seeming to remember where they were. The elderly trucker at the counter was watching them with curiosity, and Maya realized their conversation had gotten louder than she'd intended. Could you sit down for a minute?" the man asked, gesturing to the seat across from him. "Please, I think we need to talk." Maya glanced toward the kitchen where Tony was cleaning the grill, then back at the stranger. Every reasonable part of her brain said this was a bad idea. She didn't know this man. She shouldn't sit down with customers, especially ones who acted this strange. But the photograph in her hand was real, and the desperate look in his eyes told her this was important. She slid into the booth across from him, still holding the picture. "I want to know how you have this," she said firmly, "and I want to know right now." The man took a deep breath like he was preparing for something difficult. 25 years ago, he began, his voice barely above a whisper. I knew a woman named Elena Vasquez. Maya's heart skipped. Her mother's name before marriage had been Vasquez. She'd changed it to Martinez when Maya was little, after Maya's father died. At least that's what her mother had always told her. Elena Vasquez, Maya repeated. You knew my mother 25 years ago? I did more than know her, the man said, his eyes distant with memory. I loved her. I was going to marry her. The words hit Maya like a physical blow. She stared at this stranger sitting across from her, trying to process what he was saying. Her mother had been married before? She'd loved someone before Maya's father? That's impossible, Maya said. My mother was married to my father, Roberto Martinez. He died when I was 3. The man's expression became even more confused. Roberto Martinez? I've never heard that name. Elena never mentioned anyone named Roberto. Maya felt like the world was spinning around her. Nothing made sense. This man was talking about her mother like he knew her intimately. But everything he said contradicted what Maya had been told her entire life. When did you know her? Maya asked, desperate for answers. From 1998 to 2000. We met in college. We were both studying at State University. He paused, his voice growing softer. We were planning to get married after graduation. I had bought a ring and everything. Maya did quick math in her head. That would have been right around the time she was born. Her mother would have been young, maybe 20 or 21. What happened? She asked. The man's face crumpled with old pain. She disappeared. One day she was there talking about our future together, and the next day she was gone. She left me a note saying she couldn't see me anymore, that it was over. No explanation, no chance to talk. She just vanished. Maya stared at him, trying to reconcile this story with the mother she knew. Her mom had always been so honest, so straightforward. The idea that she had a secret past, that she had run away from someone she loved, seemed impossible. I spent years looking for her. The man continued. I hired private investigators. I called every Elena Vasquez in the phone book. I searched social media when that became a thing. Nothing. It was like she had disappeared from the earth. But you kept her picture, Maya said, looking down at the photograph in her hands. It was all I had left of her. The only proof that what we had was real. His voice broke slightly. I never understood why she left. I thought maybe I had done something wrong, said something to hurt her. I replayed every conversation we'd ever had, looking for clues. Maya felt tears forming in her eyes. The pain in this man's voice was real and raw even after all these years, but it also opened up 1,000 new questions about her own life. I need to know your name, she said quietly. David, he replied. David Chen. David, I need you to tell me everything you remember about my mother, because nothing you're saying matches what I've been told about her past. David leaned forward, his eyes intense. Maya, right? That's your name? She nodded, surprised he remembered it from when she'd introduced herself earlier. Maya, how old are you? 23, she answered. David went very still. Maya could see him doing calculations in his head, the same math she had done moments before. His face went through a series of emotions, surprise, realization, and then something that looked like desperate hope. 23, he repeated slowly. Elena disappeared in March of 2000. If you're 23 now, the implication hung in the air between them. Maya felt her world shifting, everything she thought she knew about her family and her past suddenly uncertain. David, she said, her voice barely audible. I think we both need answers that only my mother can give us. But even as she said it, Maya knew that getting those answers wouldn't be simple, because her mother was lying in a hospital bed across town, fighting a battle she was slowly losing. Time was running out for explanations, for truth, for healing old wounds. The photograph seemed to burn in her hands as she realized her life was about to change forever. Maya stared across the table at David, trying to process everything he had just told her. The diner felt different now, like the familiar walls had shifted while she wasn't paying attention. Even the sound of the rain seemed louder, more urgent. Tell me about back then, she said quietly. Tell me who you were when you knew my mother. David's expression softened as he traveled back in time. I wasn't the person you see today. 25 years ago, I was just David Rodriguez, a broke college student working 3 part-time jobs to pay for school. I delivered pizzas at night, worked in the campus bookstore between classes, and spent weekends doing yard work for professors. Maya could hardly picture this well-dressed businessman as a struggling student. What were you studying? Business and economics. I had big dreams but no money to make them happen. My family didn't have much. My parents worked in factories and I was the first one to go to college. He smiled sadly. Elena used to joke that I survived on coffee and determination. What was she like then? Maya asked, desperate to understand this version of her mother she'd never known. She was studying to be a teacher, elementary education. She had this way with kids that was amazing to watch. When she did her student teaching, the children would light up when she walked into the classroom. David's eyes became distant with memory. She was the most beautiful person I'd ever met, inside and out. She laughed easily, helped everyone around her, and had this incredible optimism about the future. Maya felt a pang of sadness. The mother she knew was loving but tired, worn down by years of struggle and now fighting cancer. She had never seen the carefree, optimistic young woman David was describing. She sounds wonderful, Maya said softly. She was. We spent every free moment together. Study sessions in the library that turned into long conversations about everything and nothing. Weekend trips to the lake when we could scrape together gas money. We planned our whole future together. David's voice grew thick with emotion. I was going to propose after graduation. I had saved up for months to buy a ring. Nothing fancy, but it was all I could afford. Maya's heart ached for this young man from the past who had no idea his world was about to fall apart. What happened when she disappeared? David took a shaky breath. It was March 15th, 2000. I remember the exact date because it was supposed to be our 2-year anniversary. We had plans to go to dinner at this little Italian place we loved. I showed up at her apartment with flowers ready to celebrate. He paused, lost in the painful memory. Maya waited, knowing this was difficult for him to relive. Her roommate answered the door. She looked uncomfortable, wouldn't meet my eyes. She said Elena had left that morning with all her stuff. Just packed up and moved out without saying goodbye to anyone. David's hands clenched into fists on the table. She handed me a note. 3 sentences. I can't do this anymore. Please don't look for me. I'm sorry. Maya felt tears welling up in her eyes. She could picture this young man, flowers in hand, having his world destroyed by a few simple sentences. I didn't understand. The night before, we had been making plans for spring break. We were going to drive to the coast, stay in a cheap motel, and pretend we were rich for a weekend. David shook his head. There were no warning signs, no arguments, nothing that suggested she was unhappy. What did you do? I went crazy trying to find her. I called her family, but they said they hadn't heard from her. I drove to her hometown, asked around, talked to her high school friends. Nobody knew anything. It was like she had just vanished into thin air. Maya thought about her mother's stories of the past. Elena had always said she met Maya's father after college, that they had a brief but happy marriage before he died in an accident. She had never mentioned any of this. The worst part, David continued, was not knowing why. I replayed every conversation we'd ever had, looking for clues about what I had done wrong. I wondered if there was someone else, if I hadn't been good enough for her, if she had gotten tired of being poor. You think you weren't good enough? Maya asked, looking at his expensive clothes and confident bearing. David laughed bitterly. Back then I definitely wasn't. I was a nobody from a working-class family with big dreams but no money. Maybe Elena realized she wanted something better than a future of struggle. So what happened to you after she left? I almost dropped out of school. For weeks I couldn't focus on anything. My grades started slipping. I lost one of my jobs because I kept missing shifts. My friends were worried I was having a breakdown. David rubbed his temples. But eventually the pain turned into determination. I decided that if money and success were what it took to be worthy of love, then I was going to get both. Maya watched as David transformed before her eyes, his posture straightening as he talked about building his empire. I threw myself into my studies like a man possessed, graduated top of my class, got accepted to graduate school with a full scholarship. After that, I started my first business with money I borrowed from everyone I knew. He gestured to his expensive clothes. It took 15 years, but I built Chen Industries from nothing. Real estate, construction, property development. Today the company is worth over $50 million. Maya's eyes widened. She was sitting across from someone worth $50 million, and he was telling her he had built it all because her mother broke his heart. But none of it filled the hole Elena left behind. I dated other women, even got engaged once, but nothing lasted. I kept comparing everyone to her, to what we had. David touched his wallet where the photograph had been. I carried her picture everywhere as a reminder of what I was working toward. Someday, I told myself, I would find her and prove that I had become worthy of her love. The weight of this revelation settled over Maya like a heavy blanket. This man had spent 25 years building a fortune, driven by the memory of her mother. And all that time, Elena had been struggling as a single mother, working multiple jobs to support Maya, never mentioning the successful businessmen she had left behind. David, Maya said slowly, there's something I need to tell you. Something about my mother's current situation. She saw hope flicker in his eyes and her heart broke a little more. Is she okay? Is she happy? Did she marry someone who could give her the life she deserved? Maya felt tears spilling down her cheeks. She's in the hospital. She has cancer, stage 4. The doctors say she has maybe a few weeks left. The color drained from David's face. What? That's why I'm working double shifts trying to pay for treatments that insurance won't cover. We've been fighting this for 8 months, but it's not going well. Maya's voice cracked. She's been so weak lately, sleeping most of the time. I'm scared I'm going to lose her. David stared at her in shock. She's dying? Yes, and David, there's something else. Something that might explain why she left you. Maya took a deep breath, preparing to share the suspicion that had been growing in her mind since he mentioned the timeline. You said she disappeared in March 2000? Yes. I was born in November 2000. If she left you in March... Maya let the implication hang in the air. David's face went through a series of emotions as he did the math. She was pregnant, he whispered. I think so. And I think that's why she ran away. The truth hit David like a physical blow. He gripped the edge of the table, his breathing becoming rapid and shallow. She was carrying my child and she ran away without telling me? Maya reached across the table and touched his hand. I don't know for sure, but the timing fits, and it would explain why she disappeared so suddenly with no explanation. David looked up at her with tears in his eyes. Maya, if that's true, then you're your daughter. Maya finished quietly. The diner fell completely silent except for the rain outside. Maya and David sat across from each other, two strangers who had just discovered they might be family, both trying to process a truth that changed everything they thought they knew about their lives. After 25 years of searching, David had found Elena, but he was about to lose her again, this time forever. And Maya had just discovered that everything she believed about her past might be a lie. Maya's hands shook as she pushed open the heavy hospital doors. The familiar smell of disinfectant and floor cleaner hit her immediately, but tonight it seemed stronger, more overwhelming. She had made this walk hundreds of times over the past 8 months, but tonight felt different. Tonight, she was carrying secrets that could change everything. David had wanted to come with her, but Maya knew this conversation needed to happen between mother and daughter first. He had given her his phone number and made her promise to call him as soon as she knew the truth. The hope in his eyes when she left the diner was almost too much to bear. The elevator ride to the 4th floor felt endless. Maya stared at her reflection in the polished metal doors, trying to prepare herself for what was about to happen. How do you ask your dying mother if she's been lying to you your entire life? How do you bring up a man she ran away from 25 years ago? Room 412 was at the end of the hall, past the nurses' station where the night staff barely looked up from their computers. Maya had become such a regular visitor that they knew her by name. Evening, Maya, called Nurse Patterson. Your mom had a good day today. She was awake for most of the afternoon. Maya managed a weak smile and kept walking. Through the small window in the door, she could see her mother lying in the hospital bed, looking so much smaller than Maya remembered from her childhood. The cancer had taken so much from Elena, her strength, her weight, her thick dark hair. But when she was awake, her eyes still held the same warmth and love that had gotten Maya through every difficult moment of her life. Mom, Maya whispered as she entered the room. Elena's eyes fluttered open and a smile spread across her thin face. Mia, you're here. I thought you were working late tonight. Maya pulled the familiar visitor's chair closer to the bed. She had spent so many hours in this chair, holding her mother's hand, reading to her, or just sitting quietly while Elena slept. Tonight, though, she couldn't bring herself to sit down. Mom, I need to talk to you about something important. Elena must have heard something different in Maya's voice because her expression became more alert. What is it, sweetheart? You look upset. Maya took a deep breath. There was no easy way to start this conversation. Tonight at the diner, a man came in. He had a picture of you. A picture of me? Elena's eyebrows furrowed in confusion. What kind of picture? An old one. From when you were young, maybe 20 years old? You look so happy in it, Mom. Happier than I've ever seen you. Maya watched her mother's face carefully. The man's name was David Chen. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. All the color drained from Elena's face, and her hand flew to her chest like she was having trouble breathing. The heart monitor beside her bed started beeping faster. David, Elena whispered, her voice barely audible. Oh my God, David. Maya felt her suspicions confirmed by her mother's reaction. You know him. Elena's eyes filled with tears. How is he? Is he okay? He's successful, Mom, really successful. He built a whole business empire. Maya sat down in the chair, leaning forward. But he never forgot about you. He's been carrying your picture for 25 years, wondering why you left him. Elena closed her eyes, tears streaming down her cheeks. I never wanted him to know. I prayed he would forget about me and move on with his life. He couldn't forget you, Mom. He told me you two were planning to get married. We were, Elena said softly. I loved him so much it scared me. I had never felt anything like that before. Maya's heart was pounding. Then why did you leave him? He said you just disappeared one day with no explanation. Elena was quiet for a long moment, staring at the ceiling. When she finally spoke, her voice was full of old pain and regret. Because I was pregnant, she whispered. I was pregnant with you. Even though Maya had suspected this, hearing it confirmed still felt like a shock. David is my father? Yes. Elena turned to look at her daughter, fresh tears flowing. And leaving him was the biggest mistake of my life. Maya felt like the room was spinning. Then why did you do it? If you loved him, if he loved you, why didn't you tell him about me? Elena struggled to sit up straighter in bed, wincing from the effort. You have to understand, Mija. David and I came from very different worlds. His family was poor but supportive. They encouraged his dreams, helped him however they could. What about our family? My father was difficult. He had very strong ideas about what was acceptable and what wasn't. Elena's voice became bitter. When he found out about David and me, he was furious. Maya had only vague memories of her grandfather. He had died when she was 8, and even then he had seemed like a stern, cold man who rarely smiled. What did he say? He told me that if I didn't end things with David immediately, he would disown me and kick me out of the family. But that wasn't the worst part. Elena's voice grew smaller. He threatened to ruin David's future. How could he do that? Your grandfather had connections at the university. He knew people in the business community. He said he would make sure David never graduated, never got a job, never had a chance at the life he was working so hard to build. Elena looked directly at Maya. David was so close to graduating, so close to achieving his dreams. I couldn't let my father destroy that. Maya felt anger building in her chest. So you just ran away? When I found out I was pregnant, I panicked. I knew my father would make good on his threats if he found out. I also knew David would want to marry me right away and drop out of school to support us. Elena reached for Maya's hand. He was such a good man, Mija. He would have sacrificed everything for me and the baby. But I couldn't let him throw away his future. You should have let him make that choice himself. I know that now, but I was 20 years old and terrified. I thought I was protecting him. Elena's voice cracked. I thought if I disappeared, he could finish school and build the life he deserved. I thought he would forget about me and find someone better. Maya tried to imagine her young mother, pregnant and scared, making such an impossible decision. Where did you go? I had a cousin in another state who said I could stay with her. I changed my name from Vasquez to Martinez, created a whole new identity. I told everyone I met that I was a widow, that my husband had died in an accident. Elena looked ashamed. I made up the story about Roberto Martinez so you would have a father to be proud of. All these years, I thought my father was dead. I'm so sorry. Maya. As the years went by, it became harder and harder to tell you the truth. How do you explain to a child that you ran away from her father because you thought it was the right thing to do? Maya felt overwhelmed by emotions she couldn't sort out. Anger at the deception, sadness for all the lost years, confusion about her own identity. Did you ever think about contacting him, letting him know about me? Every single day, Elena said without hesitation. Especially after you were born. You looked so much like him, Maya. You have his eyes, his stubborn chin, even his way of thinking through problems. Elena smiled through her tears. But as time went on, I convinced myself that he was better off without us. He probably had a family of his own by then. Why would he want to be reminded of an old girlfriend who had hurt him? He never forgot you, Mom. He never got married. He never had other children. He built his whole life around trying to become worthy of you. Elena's face crumpled. Oh God, what have I done? I ruined his life. I ruined your life. I ruined everything. Maya reached out and took her mother's hand. Despite her anger and confusion, she couldn't stand to see Elena in such pain. You didn't ruin anything, Mom. You made a choice that you thought was right at the time. But it was wrong. So terribly wrong. Elena squeezed Maya's hand. Your father, David, he deserved to know about you. You deserved to know him. I was a coward. You were young and scared. That's not an excuse for 25 years of lies. Elena looked at Maya with desperate eyes. Is he angry? Does he hate me? Maya thought about David sitting in the diner, tears in his eyes as he realized Maya might be his daughter. He's hurt. But I don't think he hates you, Mom. I think he still loves you. Elena started crying harder. I don't deserve his love. I don't deserve your forgiveness either. Mom, stop. You're the best mother I could have asked for. You worked so hard to give me a good life. You sacrificed everything for me. But I took away your father. I took away his daughter. I can never forgive myself for that. Maya felt her own tears starting to fall. It's not too late, Mom. He wants to see you. He wants to meet you again. Elena looked at Maya with a mixture of hope and terror. Does he know? About you being his daughter? We figured it out together based on the timing. But we're not completely sure. Elena nodded slowly. You are his daughter, Misha. There's no doubt about that. You're exactly half of each of us. The weight of this confirmation settled over Maya. For 23 years, she had believed she was the daughter of a man who died before she could remember him. Now she was learning that her father was alive, successful, and had been searching for her mother all these years. Will you see him? Maya asked quietly. Elena closed her eyes, looking exhausted from the emotional conversation. I'm dying, Maya. I have maybe weeks left. Is it fair to bring him back into my life just so he can watch me die? I think that should be his choice to make. Elena was quiet for a long time. Finally, she opened her eyes and looked at her daughter. Call him, she whispered. Tell him I'm sorry. Tell him I never stopped loving him. And tell him that meeting you was the most beautiful thing that could ever happen to him. Maya leaned forward and kissed her mother's forehead. I love you, Mom. I love you too, Mija. More than anything in this world. Elena's voice was getting weaker. And I hope someday you can both forgive a foolish old woman for all the time we lost. As Maya left the hospital room to call David, she carried with her the weight of 25 years of secrets finally revealed. Tomorrow, her mother would face the man she had never stopped loving, and Maya would meet the father she had never known she had. Maya stood outside the hospital entrance at 6 a.m, watching David pace back and forth on the sidewalk. He had been there since 5, unable to sleep, unable to stay away any longer. In the early morning light, he looked different than the confident businessman from the diner. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his perfect hair was messy, and his hands shook every time he tried to smooth down his tie. Are you ready? Maya asked gently. David stopped pacing and looked at her with fear in his eyes. What if she doesn't want to see me? What if this is too much for her? Maya had asked herself the same questions all night. After their phone conversation, David had wanted to rush to the hospital immediately. It had taken all of Maya's persuasion to convince him to wait until morning, to give Elena time to prepare herself for seeing him again. She wants to see you, Maya said. She's scared, but she wants to see you. They walked through the hospital together, past the early morning shift change, past the breakfast carts being wheeled down the halls. Maya had called ahead to let the nurses know David would be visiting. She had also talked to Dr. Patel about Elena's condition, preparing David for how different she looked now. She's very weak, Maya warned as they approached room 412. The cancer has changed her a lot. She's not the same person you remember. David nodded, but Maya could see he was struggling to prepare himself. I don't care what she looks like. I just need to see her again. Maya knocked softly on the door before pushing it open. Elena was awake, propped up against her pillows wearing the soft blue sweater Maya had brought from home. She had asked the nurses to help her wash her hair and put on a little makeup. Even in her weakened state, she wanted to look as good as possible for David. When David stepped into the room, both he and Elena froze. 25 years disappeared in an instant. Despite the illness, despite the changes time had brought to both of them, they saw each other exactly as they had been, two young people desperately in love. "Elena," David whispered, his voice breaking on her name. "David." Tears immediately started flowing down Elena's cheeks. "You came." David moved slowly toward the bed like he was afraid she might disappear again if he moved too fast. "I've been looking for you for 25 years. I know, Maya told me." Elena's voice was weak but full of emotion. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for everything." Maya quietly slipped out of the room, giving them privacy for this moment they had both waited decades to have. In the hallway, she could hear their voices through the door, soft murmurs, occasional sobs, the sound of 25 years of pain finally being expressed. She sat in the waiting area, watching other families come and go, thinking about how strange life could be. Yesterday, she was just a waitress working to pay her mother's medical bills. Today, she had a father she never knew existed. After an hour, David came out of the room. His eyes were red from crying, but there was something peaceful in his expression that hadn't been there before. "How is she?" Maya asked. "Tired, but we talked. Really talked for the first time in 25 years. David sat down beside Maya. She told me everything. About her father's threats, about being scared and alone, about the choice she thought she had to make. "Are you angry?" "Ooh." David was quiet for a moment. "I was. For about 10 minutes I was furious. All those years of wondering, all those years of thinking I had done something wrong." He shook his head. "But then I looked at her so sick and fragile, and I realized that anger was just wasted time. We don't have time for anger anymore." Maya felt relieved. She's been carrying that guilt for so long. I told her I forgave her. I told her I understood why she did what she did, even if I wished she had made a different choice. David looked at Maya. "And I told her that meeting you makes everything worth it." Over the next few weeks, David became a constant presence at the hospital. He arranged for Elena to be moved to a private room with better care. He hired the best oncologists in the state for second opinions, even though everyone knew it was too late for medical miracles. Most importantly, he simply sat with her, holding her hand and filling in 25 years of stories. Maya watched them together and saw glimpses of who they had been as young people. Elena would laugh at David's stories about his early business disasters. David would get tears in his eyes when Elena talked about raising Maya alone. They shared old memories and created new ones, making the most of the time they had left. "Tell me about Maya as a little girl," David would say, and Elena's face would light up as she described Maya's first words, her first steps, her stubborn streak that reminded Elena so much of David. "She gets that from you," Elena would tease. "She never gives up on anything, just like her father." Maya began spending time with David outside the hospital, too. They would get coffee before visiting hours started, talking about everything and nothing. David told her about his business, his travels, his dreams for the future. Maya shared stories about school, her work at the diner, her hopes of maybe going back to college someday. "What do you want to study?" David asked during one of these conversations. "I always thought about teaching," Maya said, "like Mom wanted to do." David smiled. "That's perfect. When this is all over, we'll look at schools together, the best programs in the country." "I can't afford that," Maya protested. "Maya, you're my daughter. Money is never going to be a problem for you again." David's voice was firm but gentle. "I missed 23 years of taking care of you. Let me make up for some of that now." As Elena grew weaker, the conversations in her hospital room became more precious. She wanted to tell David everything about Maya, every achievement, every struggle, every moment of pride she had felt as a mother. "She graduated valedictorian from high school," Elena said one afternoon, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of course she did," David said, squeezing Elena's hand. "Look at her mother." "She gets her brains from both of us," Elena replied with a weak smile. During Elena's final week, she made David and Maya promise her something. "Don't spend the rest of your lives grieving for me," she said, looking back and forth between them. "I got to see you both together. I got to know that Maya will be loved and taken care of. That's all I ever wanted. Elena passed away on a quiet Tuesday morning with David holding one hand and Maya holding the other. Her last words were, "Thank you for forgiving me." The funeral was small but meaningful. David had arranged everything, making sure Elena was honored as the loving mother and teacher she had always wanted to be. Several of Maya's co-workers from the diner came, along with nurses from the hospital who had grown fond of Elena during her stay. After the service, David and Maya sat together in his car, both emotionally drained but somehow complete. "What happens now?" Maya asked. "Now we figure out how to be a family," David said. "I know it won't be easy. We're basically strangers who happen to share DNA, but I want to try if you do." Maya looked at this man who had searched for her mother for 25 years, who had spent the last month learning to be a father. "I'd like that." 6 months later, Maya was enrolled at the state university, studying elementary education just like her mother had planned to do. David had sold his big house and bought a smaller one closer to campus, with a room that Maya had decorated with pictures of Elena. They established the Elena Vasquez Foundation, providing scholarships for single mothers who wanted to go back to school. The foundation also offered support services for families facing medical crises, helping them navigate the financial and emotional challenges that Maya and Elena had faced alone. Every year on Elena's birthday, David and Maya visited her grave together. They would tell her about Maya's progress in school, about the families the foundation had helped, about the relationship they were building together. "I think she would be proud," Maya said during one of these visits. "I know she would be," David replied. "She raised an incredible daughter." Maya had learned that sometimes the most important stories begin with the smallest moments. A photograph falling from a stranger's wallet, a question asked by a curious waitress, the courage to seek truth even when it might hurt. Her mother's love had been the constant thread through it all, strong enough to survive mistakes and secrets, generous enough to bring together a family that had been separated by fear and time. Standing there beside Elena's grave, with her father's hand on her shoulder, Maya understood that some love stories don't end when people die. Sometimes they just begin a new chapter, carried forward by the people left behind who choose to honor that love by creating something beautiful from the pieces.